everybody. Welcome to Psychedelics in the Beehive. So you are people like me, and you are here early, you have good seats, but we have sold, maybe even oversold, every single one of these seats. So across the next hour or two, you guys may have to squish in a little. There should be no seats between you, because we will fill up all of these seats. But thank you for being my people and being here on time. My name is Sarah Urquhart, and I am the producer of this event, and I am really happy to welcome you here. I want to give you a bit of a rundown of what's going to happen tonight, and since all of our fellow attendees will have missed this announcement, you're in the know and you can share the information. So we're going to start with, I'll be introducing our MC in just a moment, and then we'll have our first panel. And as maybe you saw on the website, there will be a 30-minute break when that panel finishes. Well, I'll go through this first. And then you can go back out to the expo, you can talk with your neighbors, your friends, you can run to the restroom, get some water. And then the second panel will start at 6:30. We'll take it. After that hour-long panel, we'll take another 30-minute break, and then Paul will start his keynote presentation. So that will be the way we do things. I also want to note we have a couple mics here. The first two panels will take questions at the end of their panel, at the end of their presentations. So if you have a question, we'll have you come to these mics and go ahead and ask your question. Paul is doing questions, but we took all of those online earlier this week, and we asked people to ask questions through Instagram, and so he won't be taking questions, but there will be questions from some of you that were submitted through that process. So I want to thank a couple of people, and first of all, I want to thank the TDA community for helping make this happen. I know I'm one of the faces of TDA, or the Divine Assembly. If you don't know what that is, we'd love to tell you about it. If you do, then you know I hope you know, it's a really growing and robust community, and it's full of lovely people who are looking for a community to be with. And so a lot of the volunteers you see here, a lot of the people who have really made this happen are from that TDA community. So I really want to give a big thank you there. As you were seeing the slides roll through, a number of those sponsors I'm just so grateful for. And one of them that I want to call out is the Huntsman Foundation. They were one of the first to step forward, and it makes it easier for other sponsors and other people to support events like this when people like the Huntsmans step forward. And you know, mental health is an important part of what they do, and they know that psychedelics can be a real blessing for people struggling with mental health issues. So thank you to the Huntsman Foundation, and then all the other businesses that you saw scrolling through. These are individuals who love this community. So where you can, support those businesses. Those same slides or similar slides will be running between each panel. So watch for those businesses and think of who you can support. A special thank you to Justin and Chad and the tech team for handling all of the details there. That's been a big help for us. And thank you to Wallaroos Furniture. They provided these chairs and couches. And also, they are our new location where TDA is meeting every week here in Salt Lake City. So if you've been wanting to come to a TDA meeting, you now know that it's in a warm, cozy, comfortable place, and we'd love to have you join us sometime. I'd like to now introduce our MC, Shane Moss. Is he in the room? Oh, there he is. Let me He's going to be handling, who went to see him last night? I know he had 2 sold-out shows. Shane is an award-winning comedian recognized for his appearances on late-night shows and popular comedy podcasts. He is also a science communicator who has interviewed over 400 scientists as the host of the Here We Are podcast. And the third hat Shane wears is as the psychedelic adventurer whose sold-out psychedelic-themed comedy tours have inspired Comedy Central's animated series, Tales from the Trip, and the Amazon Prime documentary I'm tripping over it. You guys, I can't say it. Psychonautics, a comics exploration of psychedelics. Here's Shane Moss.
Oh, Sarah Urquhart. I had no idea you were going to attempt to read all that. I would have just said, just say my name. It'll be fine. Salt Lake City, how you guys doing? Oh my goodness, this is so exciting. Guys, this is my 3rd time. I've been on a psychedelic comedy tour that I've started. It's my 2nd big one. I started in March. And this is actually my 3rd time through Salt Lake City in 9 months. So I don't know what's going on in Salt Lake City. I don't know who spiked the LDS with LSD, but this is very exciting. I'm so thrilled to be here and be a part of this. I met Steve and Sarah at a show that I did, I think, late summer or something, and they showed me some of their properties, some of the other things that they have going on with the Divine Assembly, and I just think it's absolutely amazing that we all find ourselves in this weird-ass hotel talking about psychedelics. That's amazing to me. None of this should be happening. None of it. None of us should even exist. None of this should happen at all. 13 billion years ago, there was a Big Bang, and if every single thing between that time and now hadn't gone exactly the way that it did, none of us would exist. All the little things that had to go right along the way for you to be here is insane. 4.6 billion years ago, life started bubbling up on this planet. Wasn't a great place to be if you're alive. Earth had been on fire for billions of years, then cooled down enough it started raining for hundreds of millions of years, and then Earth turned into an ocean. Still wasn't a good place to be. Didn't have an atmosphere. It's getting hit by asteroids left and right, but deep in the ocean, in cracks in rocks, bubbles would sometimes serve as membranes for bits of chemicals and energy to spring forth into life. Some of that life stumbled on copying itself, and that's what led to all of this. Copies started making copies, and once in a while there would be a copying error. Most of the time that was bad news, but once in a while there was a serendipitous error, which is essentially what we all are. And life would get a little bit better at copying, a little bit better at surviving, and much like this first joke, it was an excruciatingly slow process. It took about 2 billion years before life evolved the first mouth. It was stationary at the time, too. It started eating little bits of life around it for energy, and then something really special happened. Life evolved the first anus. Changed everything. Once there was a front and a back, life had a direction forward. It had a purpose. Before that, the most complicated forms of life on Earth, they would absorb energy through their membrane walls, and then they would diffuse it through little slits, and they diffuse waste through little slits in those membrane walls. Once there was an anus, those slits, they got repurposed by evolution, turned into fish gills, and the ocean started teeming with life. There's so much life that life would be trying to escape other forms of life, and some of it would take a chance on shallower and shallower water. Some of it even went on newly formed land. Some of it made it. And when that happened, those gills migrated back in the heads and became ears, and none of us would be hearing any of this right now if it weren't for the evolution of the anus. Guys, I bring this up for a couple reasons. One, if you think it's a good idea to eat mushrooms and go to a natural history museum, just be prepared to put together some strange connections you never really thought about before, and an incessant need to share this newfound knowledge with anyone that will listen. And two, it's that all of this existence is a trip. All of this is bizarre. The story of evolutionary life is so much crazier than an illiterate reading the truth off of 2 golden tablets. None of this should happen. It's so crazy, and it's so wonderful. I just love. I hope that we do get to appreciate that we get to be here. And I like to bring this up because the first panel is about psychedelics and mental health. And it's one of the reasons why psychedelics have stuck with me for a lifetime. I've actually been doing psychedelics for 27 years now, everybody, in case you couldn't tell from this whole look. And you know psychedelics are a different kind of substance, too, because people will woo when you say you've been doing them for 27 years. You can't do that with a lot of drugs. You get on a podium and say you've been doing meth for 27 years. It's a different audience, different kind of energy. But I stumbled on mental health reasons. I didn't do psychedelics for mental health. I was 16 years old. I was rebelling against my parents and getting in trouble and goofing around with friends and gobbled mushrooms just to... Now... almost 3 decades later, there's all these wonderful studies, and people are thankfully associating, psychedelics with all these various mental health benefits. That wasn't the case in the mid-90s as a teenager. That's not why you did it. You did it to fuck around. Now, if you're fucking around too much, someone will be like, "Hey, have you considered some mushrooms? Maybe like some MDMA-assisted psychotherapy could help you out a little bit." And I think that's beautiful. I've gained so much benefit myself. I'm actually bipolar myself, a manic depressive. Yeah, thank you. If you don't know, that means I like to dream big and then give up. And I found mushrooms, loved them, just got them anytime I could get my hands on these suckers as a teen, and it just so happened that I happened to do them during some very depressive episodes, and it just so happened I stumbled on this pattern that mushrooms would lift me out of that depression faster than anything to this day that I found. Exercise also helps, but how the fuck? You're most miserable, you're just going to start doing overhead squats suddenly? I don't think so. I'll gobble some mushrooms, watch some Animal Planet, maybe get a couple laughs, a little inspiration, get myself out of bed and get the ball rolling, and then maybe try to take on some new habits. But I'm going to need a little mushroom help to consolidate all the problems of my life and put together some new solutions and a bit of inspiration. I found that again and again in life, and so I'm so excited for this first panel. The moderator of this panel, actually none of this would be happening right now, wrote a Rolling Stone article about the Divine Assembly a couple years ago, and that's what kind of launched this organization in a big way, and it's a big part of why this movement is growing so much in Salt Lake City in particular. And so please give a big warm welcome to Cassidy Rosenblum, everybody.
Hi guys, I'm Cassidy Rosenblum. I'm so delighted to be back in Salt Lake City. Like Shane said, I came here 2 years ago to write a story for Rolling Stone about the Divine Assembly and really about Mormons using psychedelics to kill religious trauma, sexual shame, women reclaiming their own authority with the use of psychedelics. And I'm just curious, raise your hand if that general story sort of applies to you. Yeah, it's a lot. You guys are some really, really interesting people. You guys are why I became a journalist, because there's really no story like reality. I remember calling my editor and be like, I got a story about Mormons on mushrooms. And he's like, do it, fiction's dead. So I have the distinct honor of introducing our panelists tonight. We have Dr. Pamela Kryskow. Clap for her. And Dr. Kryskow is the medical lead for the Roots to Thrive program. She is the founding board member of the Psychedelic Association of Canada and the medical chair of the Vancouver Island University postgraduate certificate in psychedelic medicine assisted therapy, and is also a firefighter. Was a firefighter. Yeah, give it up. Next, we have Dr. Clancy Cavnar. Dr. Cavnar has a doctorate. Yes. Dr. Cavnar has a doctorate in clinical psychology from John F. Kennedy University. She currently works in private practice in San Francisco and is co-founder and a member of the board of directors of the Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines, and is also a research associate of the Interdisciplinary Group for Psychoactive Studies. Woo. Last but not least, we have Dr. Reid Robison, MD, MBA. He is a board-certified psychiatrist and chief clinical officer at Numinus, where he oversees the clinical services, including ketamine-assisted therapy at the company's 9 clinics across the US and Canada. He has led over 250 clinical trials in neuropsychiatry and previously served as coordinating investigator for the MAP-sponsored MDMA-assisted psychotherapy study of eating disorders. Get up for Dr. Robison. And just so we know who we're talking to tonight, can I see by a show of hands who has not done a psychedelic before? Welcome. We love you guys too. Thank you for being here. So this is a pretty seasoned crowd, so we are going to give you guys a seasoned version of this talk. It will come as no surprise to you guys that all 3 of our panelists believe that psychedelics, when taken properly in the right set and setting, can be very transformative for mental health. And so we're going to skip over the can they, can't they, and dive a little bit deeper into the how. And I think one of the things that's so remarkable about psychedelics as opposed to other pharmaceuticals is that psychedelics seem to go to the root of the issue as opposed to just alleviating the symptom. And I would love to just know, Dr. Robison, how does this work?
And you can call me Reid, by the way.
Okay.
So cure has been a bit of a dirty word in psychiatry. Rightly so, given that traditionally the tools we've had have been lacking, right? So if you had asked me a decade ago if there would be a psychedelic up for approval by the FDA, I probably would have asked, "What are you smoking?" You know, and it's and on top of that, you have this growing evidence from phase 2 and 3 data from MAPS. We're looking at PTSD, for example, showing that not only was it effective, but over 70% of people coming out of the study who got MDMA plus therapy, 3 doses, no longer even met criteria for PTSD. So I think using the PTSD as an example of are we getting towards the cure, what we really want to go for, might be best answered by a bit of a metaphor. Like healing from trauma, it's like you were in a war, which you may have been in many cases of PTSD. And there was a battle, and it was intense, and you didn't have the resources at the time, and you lost a part of yourself, and it's still on the battlefield. And the way you need to go back there, the way you need to reclaim it is by going back there, but you've tried. Unfathomable for some to go back to that place. And that's what we've been stuck with in psychiatry. But along comes MDMA. There's no other medicine like it with that combination of serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, wrapped in this like warm hug of oxytocin that gives you like a bulletproof vest to go in there with confidence, with skill and confidence to reclaim that lost part of yourself, to go there again and rewrite that trauma narrative and return to wholeness. And so you have these other medicines too. Just to continue on that analogy, I'll just pick one, like ketamine, for example. We use clinically now every day in our clinics here in Utah, sometimes for PTSD or depression, other conditions. And that might be more like you're going in with a helicopter and you're going to reclaim that part of yourself, and it might take a few tries. It might take some extra skill and confidence in navigating it, but time and time again we've seen people come out on the other side in that place of wholeness rather than just treating symptoms with medicines as a Band-Aid approach. So it's a beautiful time to be alive. We need it desperately, these new tools for healing and growing, and I think we are able to talk more now about going for the cure, not just treating symptoms. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. Yeah, clap for that. I love that analogy of the bulletproof vest, and I love that you're able to bring your scientific expertise to this conversation. And everyone here is a doctor. Everyone is very well versed in this. And I'd also like to invite our panelists today to also step out of these scientific boxes if you want to, because if there's anything we know from the psychedelic experience, it's that it is so much bigger and stranger and unrulier than a lot of the scientific boxes we try to fit it in. So we like science, we believe in science, but just play with that, maybe, if you like. There's another concept we hear a lot in these conversations, and that's the concept of the inner healer. That psychedelics allow us to somehow tap into this innate knowledge that we have, that we know what's best for ourselves. And Dr. Kryskow, I would love to hear a little bit about what you have come to learn about the inner healer. And this almost seems potentially revolutionary because, in the past, if I went to the doctor, I went to the shrink, there would be a person in a position of authority telling me what I need. And this almost seems to invert that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and Pam, too.
Sure.
Before I answer the question, part of it, the premise there of, the doctor would tell you what to do. I think of being a physician as a huge privilege and like an act of service to my patients, and that it's a walking with. And I really hope that these medicines coming back into medicine will allow all of us, like what you said, invite us back into our spirituality, back into who we are as humans, not just Pam the doctor, but also Pam the kayaker, Pam the gardener, Pam, all the other things we do. So really seeing medicine as an act of service in what we're doing and helping, walking with people. And the concept of the inner healer, or the inner healing intelligence, is exactly what you said, this knowing that we know what we need. We know what is best for us deep down inside. And as Reid talked about, as well, we get these layers, whatever happens in our life with these traumas that may come from maybe our childhood, maybe if you're in service as a first responder, trauma after trauma after trauma, and these layers come on. And sometimes it's hard to get back to that self where we know exactly what we need. And these medicines are such a kind tool to us in that they let us get back under those layers in a way where the part of us that's trying to protect us, the hypervigilant, our amygdala, that's like danger, 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 watch out, be careful. That part gets to, with the rest of the brain, parts of the brain that aren't talking to each other, when we're in these hypervigilant states, start to quiet down. And when that part of us quiets down and we start to be able to look, like I said, like this helicopter ride where we can look at what's happened from a whole different perspective, where our bigger brain is coming in and going, yes, that terrible thing happened, and it's not happening now. And now you're safe. And now you have other options. Because when that hypervigilance calms down, that then you really get to see, and that's alongside with the neuroplasticity that these medicines give us, is then it gives us the opportunity to create the new pathway again, to go back to that artistry that we had, or that peacefulness that we've had. So that inner healer is always there. And when we can't get back to it, as we know, there's so many processes going on in our body, inflammation, cortisol, and when you can calm down the amygdala, like when you're in these hypervigilant states, we see alongside of this chronic pain, we see alongside of this eating disorders, alongside of this autoimmune diseases, inflammatory conditions. And so when these medicines allow us to get back to that self, that who we really, really are deep down inside, and calm down, then we start to heal. And quite often we'll see chronic pain syndromes go away, fibromyalgia symptoms calm down, autoimmune conditions start to go down, cancer, changes course. And so inside of us is all of that. And so I'm so glad that we have access to these medicines again in the system, so that we can really integrate these. And, we all have the right to whole human wellness and to health and wellness. And I really hope the medical field becomes the new wave, is wellness. Not sick care, but well care.
I love that. Not sick care, but well care.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about integration, and specifically a tricky experience that can come up for a lot of us is when we're in the psychedelic space, that can sometimes be accompanied by an increased sense of personal power. And this is a really beautiful thing, right? It's wonderful to have an increased sense of your own agency over your own life, especially if you have been disempowered before, or you have been marginalized by the society that we live in. And the flip of that is that power also can be scary, right? Power has a bad reputation in our society for good reasons. Power can corrupt. Power can be abused. Power can justify all sorts of things. And so my question, Dr. Cavnar, for you is, when you're working with patients in the integration process and they have felt this increased sense of power, how do you help them walk the line with that? Because there can almost be a sense of shame or fear, like, am I allowed to feel this powerful? Am I allowed to be feeling these things?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's people who are finally discovering that they have power, and I think often it comes with feelings of humility as well. So that combination is like what healing looks like, is when you feel connected to everybody and you realize that you're part of God, and that's the most powerful position you can be in, but you don't feel like you're better than other people. I think there's some cases that, especially with ayahuasca, that people have got the idea that they are God and that you are not their equal, and that's an expansion of, like, I think people look inside and they see how beautiful it is, but they forget that everybody has that same beauty inside. And I think they can get in the way of healing it's spiritual bypassing, where you just focus on how wonderful you feel, or what what spirit came and told you were great, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you don't deal with the painful stuff that you don't want to look at. And I think, but an ongoing practice, like if you were to drink ayahuasca a couple times a year or more often, I think you get past those things, because what really is happening is that the healing needs to happen. And I think sometimes people have a wonderful, first experience. It's almost like ayahuasca saying, welcome, you can come, you're great, I love you. And so then people are like, I'm great, it loves me. And then they start saying, stuff that they don't really want to look at. But I think it provides like a nest for you to, sit in, to be safe in as much as, because when you were talking about, Reid, like the bulletproof coat of MDMA, like ayahuasca is not like that. People don't feel protected and safe when, it's often very scary. And, people see things they don't want to see, and I think that might inspire people to sort of look away to, some other thinking that they're great or everything's fine or that they finally discovered it. I remember one night after I had a very strong ayahuasca session, like, wow, now I'm enlightened. What am I going to do with my life? And then, like the next day, I was like back to my rotten self. So it's something. It's a process, and I don't think it stops when the person goes, I'm so great, because those people. I mean, there are like sociopaths that drink ayahuasca and have their own like cults and stuff. But I think most people like go through like great, and then terrible, and then great, and as the process goes, like it can take many years. For me, it took like decades to get to the stuff that really I needed to look at, because I wanted to. I guess as much as I tried, I still wanted to avoid that or maybe I just wasn't ready. I don't know. But I think that also intentions are very important, and I used to not think that before. I did more work, but really asking for what you want. I think you're much more likely to get it. And people who say, just give me what you think I need. Like, no, figure out what you need and like go there, because it's probably not like stars and fairies. It's probably like some bad thing that happened to you. So I don't know if that's a full answer. But.
Thank you. And staying on the topic of integration for a second, another thing that we hear a lot is that it's not the psychedelics, it's the community. And Pam, I want to come back to you on this question because we've talked about this a little bit before. It's something I've never quite understood, to be honest, because if it's just that the juice is in the community and psychedelics have nothing to do with it, then, why aren't we up here talking about bowling leagues or Tupperware parties, or there are a million ways to find community? Obviously, there's a grain of truth to this. One of my favorite writers on this topic, Johann Hari, writes about depression as really being a disease of disconnection. And so, of course, anything that reconnects us is going to be healthy for us. But just wondering if you could talk about that community aspect a little bit.
Yeah, at the little nonprofit Roots to Thrive that we have in Canada, one of our slogans is "Come for the psychedelics, but stay for the community," and that's just replays itself over and over and over, because I don't think anyone out there has ketamine deficit syndrome or psilocybin deficit syndrome or MDMA deficit syndrome. But I do know that we all really want connection and love and community and purpose. And again, when these medicines allow us to get back to ourselves, and it integrates with what you were talking about, Clancy, about integration, is that's where the community holds you accountable to that. So if you're working in a therapy team, your therapy team is your community to hold you accountable to what you have learned under the medicine. One of my mentors has always said, once you bring the unconscious to the conscious, now your job is to action that. Not go chase another medicine or another experience, but now action it, become that. And that's where the community holds you accountable. And it's quite often in our program we do only group therapy. And what is so phenomenal is somebody will have their psychedelic experience and have some insights, and then a few weeks later they'll be going, being their old snarky self again, and somebody in their community, their therapy community, will say, wait a minute, that's not you. This is the person you are, and they'll hold you accountable. And when your community holds you accountable with love, unconditional positive regard, and they hear you and they witness you, you step up. You step up into who you are and who you want to be in your purpose in life. And that's what community is about. And these medicines get us, again, back to ourselves. The group or our community helps us integrate what we learned so that we are accountable to what we learned. And then you get to a point where, the psychedelics are no longer in your healing realm, but possibly now they've moved into your artistry realm, where you are now into the wellness realm. But it takes a community to hold you responsible for that. And again, the community is where the love is, and community is where your connection is. And that's ultimately what we want. I don't think we want more psychedelics. We want community and love. And if psychedelics can be a wonderful tool to get us there. Yeah.
So you're saying not as much accountability with bowling leagues.
Say again?
There's not as much accountability with bowling leagues.
No, bro. No, good shot, bro. No.
Yeah. I want to talk about God for a second. Is that okay with you guys? So I am someone who went from being atheist to believer from psychedelics. They were my gateway. And, for me, the process has been like finding out that we are part of the most epic story ever that we most certainly did not write. And yet we're also writing our own characters and co-writing it together. This is my experience, at least. And this has brought so many things to my life. It's brought awe, gratitude, humility, reverence, purpose, meaning. And so it strikes me that it's very hard for depression to coexist alongside awe, right? And so, Reid, my question for you is, when we're talking about how these things heal, can we afford to leave God or the goddess out of these conversations?
So your story of psychedelics as the gateway drug back to God is one I've heard time and time again and experienced to a large extent in myself too. And I think what's happened in psychiatry parallels what's happened in society and me individually is we have thrown out the baby with the bathwater in terms of our response to religion, and it's time to bring that back. Like I think, in the Freud and Carl Jung era, that was the idea of God was discarded from the therapy rooms. And it was Carl Jung who was pushing to bring it back. A Swiss psychiatrist who contributed so much to our nomenclature right now. But when he was working with individuals stuck in the throes of addiction, he said something like, if only I had something that could bring about a mystical experience or reconnect these clients with a higher purpose. And it sounds like he was saying he'd like to occasion a mystical experience, which and he was just before that initial psychedelic renaissance, and then you had Bill Wilson, founder of AA, who had his own mystical experience and what ended up in the AA curriculum. But I could tell you I've never found any greater tool or force to help individuals who are stuck in a mental health struggle than connecting with their higher purpose, whatever God means to them. And we know that since the beginning of time, we as humans have turned to these sacraments to help commune with the divine, and because it does make all the difference. And that's certainly what happened with me, thanks to psychedelics in large part, including one night sitting in the jungle with ayahuasca and just having the lid blown off of my understanding or what I thought about the universe. And so I am a big fan of bringing spirituality back into the therapy room, into our day-to-day conversations and how we live our lives.
Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm. We have about time for one more question, and then we're going to turn it over to your questions. This last question is for Dr. Cavnar. Who knows when this stuff is going to be decriminalized, legalized? I'm optimistic that it probably will. But I also want to acknowledge some of the unintended consequences that can come with legalization. And when these things start to go from being sacred plant medicines to commodities, things can get a little bit wonky. When you have Sam Altman, who's the face of AI, also chairing Journey Collab, can be a little interesting. And someone who's done a lot of really good thinking about this at Johns Hopkins is Nessie Deveneaux. And I just want to read a quote from her. She says, although industry insiders have positioned psychedelics as solutions for civilizational threats, including political polarization, the rise of fascism, environmental degradation, and increasing rates of mental illness, scholars in other fields have associated all of these problems with rising inequality. If the psychedelic industry provides the impetus for yet more billionaires and unicorn companies, these promised outcomes, which are cited to justify the industry's rapid expansion, will amount to nothing more than a bait and switch. By increasing the overall inequality in society, the psychedelics industry could end up fueling the root causes of the very problems to which it is selling supposedly novel solutions. How do we avoid this fate?
Well, I think it's the matter of, I think we talked about the patriarchy coming in and noticing now, here's something new that is powerful, can make big changes, and that can be very, remunerative. You can get paid for that. And I know people who have already been running these retreats for executives to get better ideas so they can make more money at their company, or, and all of that it's gonna happen, and there's nothing, I know it sounds so apocalyptic, but I don't think there's much people can do to stop that from happening. The main pushback is to remember, like, the indigenous roots. How was it used for, thousands of years in rituals to enhance people's lives or to heal sicknesses? And I try to remind people that, like, mushrooms are free. You can find them. Remember, in college, we would just go out into the cow field and pick them. You don't need somebody to sell it to you in a pill, and all this, like, I don't know how much the MAPS treatment's going to cost, but, like, even people that I've tried to refer for, like, someone to sit with them with mushrooms, like, it's $1,000. They're saying, well, this much per hour, and this meeting before and after, and then up in Oregon also, it's like, it's $1,000 to take mushrooms, which are free. I mean, they're almost like ridiculously free. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important for everybody that uses them, like, grow your own and find people who can, if you feel like you need someone to sit with you, you don't have to pay them $1,000, and you don't have to, like, I love me a very posh ayahuasca retreat, but you don't have to like go to the nicest ones. It's just stay in touch with the people, like the indigenous people are the ones who have at least the ayahuasca that, and it gets passed until there's, like, it seems like something that's unattainable, but it's just two plants, and they grow, and they don't prevent you from picking them. Maybe now there's more laws, but I think it's important to not get sucked into this idea, and because it's happening now, and it's going to happen to everything nice gets noticed and then monetized, and that will happen with this as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I think it's time for your questions. If you guys want to come up to the microphones and form a line. Don't be shy. And go ahead and tell us who you are and where you're from.
There we go. My name's Josh Capps. I'm from St. George, Utah, here with my wife. Let's see here. My question is, what advice would you give someone who's probably 2-3 years away from their master's of psychology, who wants to be, like, 100% in, and And what is that journey over the next few years? What do you recommend those boxes to check off, and what can they be doing right now?
Great question. Who wants to take that?
I'm happy
Dr.
to jump in
Kryskow?
on that
Yeah.
as having started a university program on it. I think the best way to think of working with psychedelics is it's not the main show. I think if you want to be, if this is what you'd like to do for the rest of your life or as a therapist, is you have to be really, really good at a therapy first. And I really encourage people to become really solid therapists, and then layering on psychedelics as a tool in a much larger toolbox is good. Then, because not everybody needs psychedelics. Sometimes they need exercise and better food and maybe housing and income, and there's a lot of other things there first that are really important. But if you want this as your career, then first become an excellent therapist, whether that's a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or spiritual care, clergy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then train in a really good, solid program that will cover all the bases and make you a fantastic, high-integrity, safe practitioner.
And I would add to that, this course I took, and if you were going to study like mental health, is internal family systems therapy. I found to be really useful for working, and it's all the rage now. So there's trainings. I did a specific training for just people that were interested in psychedelics. So I would recommend that as like a course to really be. It's very helpful to use, even if you're not a therapist. If you learn the techniques, you can use it on yourself when you're tripping.
Next question. Oh,
Hi. Oh.
Go ahead.
Hi. My name's Irie. I just want to say thank you, Reid, for your podcast. It's amazing. I've been listening to it a whole bunch, and it's just been super inspiring for me, so thank you. I'm just curious about the future of the research landscape when it comes to like psychedelic polypharmacy. Adding ketamine and mushrooms together, or LSD and mushrooms together. Is there a future for that, like kind of in the near future? What might that look like if these things are sort of integrated together?
Thank you for that question and for the kind words on the podcast. It's nice to know that someone's listening out there. And my podcast friend and colleague Steve Thayer is in the room here somewhere. If you look for the beard and the bald head, say hi to Steve. It's called Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers, and we talk about psychedelic therapy. So, but that's a great question. Something I'm very interested in is what comes next. What are the research gaps looking forward? And researchers are starting to address this. Like, what happens when you give LSD and MDMA, for example, together, a recent study? Or what's the optimal sequencing of these things? Might you use MDMA as a tool for healing from trauma and then bring something like psilocybin in to dissolve ego structures and work on other parts of that, self-realization? There's a lot of work to do in understanding how these things work, how they work with people with antidepressants. MAPS has been doing that, some of the psilocybin research. And so it's an exciting time looking forward, and studies are coming out every week, including more and more on that topic. So stay tuned, and let's all keep asking these brilliant questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Hi. So obviously psychedelics is a big part of all of our lives, but there's still a big social stigma to it. I wanted to get your ideas of how to have conversations about the importance of psychedelics and how to explain it to people who don't necessarily understand it, so that you can bring them into this part of your life that you find so beneficial.
Great question.
This is probably one of the most common questions we all get asked, and I have my perspective is you don't have to. You know, you can, I think, you know, not everybody likes chocolate ice cream. It's okay. And when they're ready, that door will appear to them. You know, I think we're beyond the stigma, honestly. I think we know that the war on drugs was a mistake. I think we know that we lost a lot of years of research in these being great medicines for us. So I think just, you know, have a great life, live by example, and, you know, they're going to ask, why do you look so great? Why are you doing so well? And that opens a door. But I don't think we have to get out there and be evangelical about this at all. You know, just keep going. Be a great person. Be a kind person. Do great things. Live a great life. And open the doors. And that's it. You know, there's always a segment of society that will never catch up. And you want to keep moving. You know, you live life driving forward. Like our comedian said, you know, life is forward, not looking backwards. So they'll catch up when they're ready, I think, and you don't have to worry about it.
Hey. So my name is Paul. Pleasure to be here and love listening to you guys. My question is this: I like to hear stories. I connect a lot with people. So could you share, if you're willing, either your own personal story or a story of an experience that you had that just totally radically changed your mind about your view or experience with psychedelics and what that did for you, kind of projecting to the future? Like, how did that jettison you into a different direction than you were going already? Is it? I don't know if that's too much, sorry.
No, that's a great one. Does anyone want to share?
I'll say something. I had, like I was talking about before, this totally, I was recalling the words to this Santa Daime song saying, "You're a child of God," and then all of a sudden when I thought that, like this sun rose in my heart and like the whole room was illuminated, and I realized how much I loved everyone in the room, and took all my power not to run up and say, "I love you so much." And then it was like God said, I was like, "I'm 99% you," and it was like, "Yes, you are." And it was the best feeling ever, and I've had so much energy in my body, and I went home and speaking in tongues and running around the room, just whoa, what's going on? And that's when I thought, oh, I must be enlightened now. It happened. But,
I love that. Where did that take you from that moment into your life? Do you feel like that was a pivotal moment that moved you way off, or was that just a little bit of a shift, and it took a lot more experiences to get you to a different
No, it was
place?
pretty significant for me, just to feel like, you know what, no matter what other bad things are happening, remember that. Inscribe it in your heart.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you.
Can I?
Just a little short here. You kind of touched on this a few questions ago, but could you share either some references or resources on what psilocybin or MDMA or ketamine or anything mixed with current pharmaceuticals, even something such as benign as like a Tylenol versus antidepressants and the gamut of things people are taking? Because I found that if you ask your GP, they kind of look at you like, what do you mean you're taking psilocybin? And they really have no idea what to tell you. So is there a issue with mixing things, and where do you find that out?
There's some great resources online, especially like the groups around Zendo and Nest that do festivals, have great things. And there's one online that you can find easy. It's called TripSit, and it's a grid where you can look at the medicine, the psychedelics, and then pharmaceutical medicines along the side. And that's a real quick look. But I think for any pharmacists out there, there is a great opportunity and career going forward for clinical pharmacists for exactly this. And our team, we have 2 pharmacists that we refer to our patients to, so that the patients can get individualized advice. And they'll give them just a great plan. Okay, so your psilocybin session is here, and so this is what we're going to do. So you're going to start weaning here because this interacts and this doesn't. And so I think, and a lot of it, even for the pharmacists, there's one pharmacist, Ben Malcolm, who does a lot of work and does a lot of podcasts on this as well. And so it's a great area. But, I mean, the reality as physicians is we don't actually know how most things interact at all because there's never been a study on that, because those are very difficult studies to do, right? So it's a great area of science, and a lot of it is we're thinking that maybe this will interact with that and it might do this, and so we follow some protocols to be 100% safe with our patients. So that's what I would do. Start out at trip sit, because you got the grid, and then if you're trip sit, and then if you're really have a lot of medications or herbs, vitamins, supplements you're taking, sit down with a clinical pharmacist that really knows this, and they'll sit there and look at it all. Is that what you, any other thing to add to that?
I was going to suggest the same resources, including Ben Malcolm, who goes by Spirit Pharmacist, has a lot of talks out there, some on the Psychedelic Medicine Association, but I can relate. I've heard so many stories of people sitting down with their prescriber and feeling shame when they try to bring up a very valid question, when they're just trying to do their own work to heal and grow. And that is thankfully changing. I think, what is it, the latest survey shows 80% of psychiatrists or physicians are in favor of at least legalizing these as tools. So we're getting there, but there aren't the same databases that exist for all the other meds yet. When I started working with ayahuasca a while ago, I got on speed dial with a lot of the shamans of, okay, they've got their like this, the psychospiritual answer of what can coexist with ayahuasca and the dieta and all that. And then there are some real psychopharmacology questions to answer, as many of us know, like with antidepressants and things that might interact. And it's different for every psychedelic, and we're learning more and more as we go. So I think the more, it won't be long until we have more avenues for getting that consult or consulting that database. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more quick one.
Richard, thank you. I was wondering about dosages for psilocybin, and I've read the literature and I read the literature, but it seems like the psilocybin tests out of NYU, Johns Hopkins, UCLA are all over, like sometimes they use a microdose, sometimes they use 2 grams or 30 milligrams per 70 kilograms. And the shamans use 3 to 5s maybe or something like that. And yet everybody seems to have good clinical results as far as treating of depression and anxiety and end-of-life experiences. What is your experience with the dosages, and is your results dose-related or not so? Or give us a little guidelines, if you would.
I can take that initially, then pass it over to add to it. But my opinion is that dose does matter, and some of the psilocybin studies have looked at 2 different doses or more, and you have to translate from the doses in a research study, like 20. We're doing a study in Draper, Utah, down the road, of psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. Anyone could call in and get screened for that, and it's a 25 milligram or placebo. But 25 milligram psilocybin, you have to translate into dried grams, which would be more like 3 point something dried grams, depending on the strain. But what's interesting is looking at how the different doses perform. Like we just did an LSD study for anxiety in Draper, one of the sites, and we'll probably have another one later this year with MindMed, the sponsor, and they looked at 25 micrograms, 50, 100, 200 micrograms, and it was actually the 100 microgram dose that did best, not necessarily the top dose that was studied. So these are things that need to be worked out in the research in order to use them in the best way possible, the safest, most effective way for mental health conditions. It's different if you're looking at kind of spiritual use, religious ceremony, rite of passage, etc. But what would you all add to that?
Yeah, we're lucky in our program in that we've been able to actually work with whole mushrooms. At one point, botanically extracted psilocybin and synthetic psilocybin, and it is really, it depends. So for example, in the clinical trials, almost all the clinical trials are using synthetic psilocybin, and then mushrooms, they vary in their potency. So it's not extrapolatable at all, and mushrooms have changes in their potency depending on their age and the species they are. So what we found in our end-of-life group when we had to use the synthetic is that those that had never had a psilocybin experience, they had a very light experience, and they certainly didn't really get deep into the medicine. They were quite light. Those in the group that had had a previous psilocybin experience, either with us or with on their own, they went deeply into the medicine. So there's something about they had already met psilocybin, and they knew what to expect, and they went in. When we worked with mushrooms, we had people that went in equally deep at 2 grams of psilocybe cubensis that were quite fresh, so the potency would have been good, like at 2%, 1.5 to 2%. And then that they went deeply in at 2 grams, and then we had people in the same group that did 5 grams and went deeply in, and they had very interesting, like equally spiritual and deep and therapeutic experiences. So it's really going to depend on what it is, what species it is, the age of that species, if it is whole mushrooms. And you have to keep in mind that everything in most of the stuff in the clinical trials is synthetic or botanically extracted, and all of you are using mushrooms. So it's hard to compare, right? Because they're not really the same thing. And then when you get to microdosing too, microdosing then we find is really a great extension of the big spiritual dose or the therapeutic dose, and then microdosing after is also really powerful for extending the healing.
Do you think that the synthetic is different from actual mushroom because the mushroom has other components beyond the psilocybin, correct? And
this will be our last word on this.
Yeah, we're actually publishing a paper on this because we have 4 people that have had, all 4 of them have had whole mushrooms, synthetic psilocybin, and botanically extracted. And over the preference 100%, and that's a pretty unique population. And over the top, all of them prefer the whole mushrooms. Much more, the journey was better, the onset was better, the peak experience was better, the offset was better.
Thank you.
Well, we are all out of time. Thank you guys so much for being here. And let's just give it up one last time for our 3 amazing panelists. Get out of here.
Right. That was the Psychedelics and Mental Health panelists. Fantastic. And you guys crushed it with the questions. Listen, I've been to a lot of psychedelic conferences. I've been doing this for years now, enough to know a lot of times people get a mic and they'll be like, let me tell you about when I smoked toad last week. And it has nothing at all to do with the panel. So those were wonderful examples of concise, on-point questions that were relevant to the panel. That was a great example. Keep that in mind for the next panel. And we're going to take a short break. In fact, that last question is a perfect lead way into the next panel. The moderator is someone who's involved in kind of helping put together some guidelines and stuff as we talk about the changing landscape of psychedelics. That starts at 6:30. I will be back on stage. I'll do some jokes or something. Words will come out of my mouth starting around 6:25. So, if I'm on stage, start coming in just so I don't care if you see whatever I have to say, but it would be nice if you're settled in at 6:30 when the panel starts up, just so it's easier to get all of that going. And with that, you guys have enough time for a quick DMT trip and some water, and we'll see you back in 20.